Once upon a time, in a land far away, try pasting a very long story, he paid $200 for a horse everyone else had already forgotten. By nightfall, a single voicemail would leave him standing alone in his kitchen, hands shaking, realizing the horse in his barn was never meant to disappear. The kill pen sat just outside the county line, where pavement cracked into dirt and dust hung in the air like a warning. It was the kind of place people passed without slowing, the kind that did not belong in stories with happy endings. On that late summer morning in West Texas, the sky looked washed out and tired, like it had seen too much already. Jonah Whitaker had not planned to stop. He told himself that as he pulled his truck onto the gravel shoulder, dust blooming around the tires. He needed hay. Cheap hay. Someone had mentioned this place sold leftover bales after auctions. That was it. In and out. No looking. The sound hit him first when he stepped out of the truck. Metal gates clanging. Hooves scraping hard dirt. A low, restless noise that pressed into his chest. Jonah pulled his hat lower and walked toward the office, eyes forward, pretending the rows of holding pens did not exist. He had learned that looking was a choice. The smell followed anyway. Dust, sweat, manure, fear. The auctioneer's voice rolled through a loudspeaker, flat and practiced, calling numbers without feeling. Jonah signed the clipboard, nodded at the clerk, and stepped back outside. He was told the hay would be available after the next lot. 15 minutes. Maybe 20. He waited by his truck, staring toward the open land beyond the yard, thinking about fence repairs and the quiet dinner he would eat alone that night. Ordinary thoughts, safe thoughts. Then a gate slammed open behind him. Jonah turned despite himself. A group of horses was being moved between pens, most crowded together, heads low, bodies tight with fear. They pushed and flinched like they expected pain. Jonah felt his chest tighten and told himself to step away. That was when he saw the one that did not move. The bay gelding stood near the back rail, a few steps apart from the others, dark coat dulled by dust. Ribs faintly showing. He did not press forward. He did not call out. He simply stood there, still and watching. There was something unsettling about that calm. Jonah tried to look away. The horse shifted slightly, just enough that one dark eye caught the light. For a brief moment, it looked straight at Jonah, not past him. At him. The feeling hit Jonah like a memory he could not place. He broke eye contact first and shoved his hands into his jacket pockets. "Don't," he muttered, unsure who he was talking to. The horse was moved toward the auction ring. Jonah followed without meaning to. Up close, he saw an old, healed scar on the shoulder. Hooves worn unevenly, trimmed by someone who knew enough to get by. The horse walked quietly, not dragging, not fighting. Careful. In the ring, the auctioneer's voice picked up speed. Age approximate, no guarantees, sold as is. The bidding started low and stalled fast. The crowd lost interest. The horse stood in the center of the ring, dust clinging to its legs. Its ears flicked, listening. Then it turned its head again, toward Jonah. Jonah's breath caught. He thought of all the times he had chosen silence over involvement. All the times he had convinced himself that staying out of things meant doing no harm. 200, someone said. Jonah realized the voice was his. The gavel cracked. Sold. The sound echoed longer than it should have. Jonah stood frozen, then felt the weight of it settle in. The horse was his now. Paperwork followed. Cash exchanged hands. The receipt was folded and tucked away like it meant nothing. Out back, Jonah backed his trailer into place and waited. They led the horse out alone. No struggle. No rope snapping tight. The horse walked behind the handler, calm and thin and steady. At the trailer ramp it paused, listening to the hollow metal sound, then stepped up on its own. Jonah latched the gate and rested his hand there longer than necessary. This was no longer abstract. This was real. The drive home was quiet. The horse rode steady. No panic, no scrambling. At the ranch gate, the familiar land opened around Jonah like a breath he didn't realize he'd been holding. In the barn, the horse stepped down slowly and stood in the light, taking everything in. Old wood, clean stall, fresh water. Jonah unclipped the lead and stepped back. The horse drank deeply, then calmly began to eat. Jonah leaned against the stall door, watching. "Guess neither of us planned today," he said softly. The horse did not lift its head, but something in its posture shifted, alert, aware, not broken. That night, Jonah lay awake listening to the quiet ranch settle. The image of the horse standing alone in the pen would not leave him. Neither would the feeling that this animal had not survived by accident. By morning, Jonah knew one thing for certain. Whatever story this horse carried, it had not ended at the kill pen. Morning came quietly to the ranch. Pale light slipped through the barn slats and settled on dust floating in the air. Jonah was awake before the sun cleared the horizon. He lay still for a moment, listening. No frantic movement, no banging against wood, just calm. When he reached the barn, the horse was already standing near the stall door, ears turning toward Jonah's boots. Not pushing forward, not retreating, watching. "Morning," Jonah said softly. The horse did not react like most new arrivals did. No jump, no nervous sidestep. It simply shifted its weight and waited. Jonah went through his routine, filling water, setting hay, opening the doors wider to let the day in. The horse followed every movement with steady eyes, learning the rhythm of the place. As the hours passed, Jonah noticed things that would not leave him alone. The horse stepped back when Jonah stepped forward, not because of pressure on the lead, but because it read Jonah's body. When a tool clanged against wood, the horse adjusted instead of spooking. When wind rattled the roof, it did not flinch. By mid-morning, Jonah led the horse into a small turnout near the barn. The gelding walked beside him, stopping when Jonah stopped, moving when Jonah moved. In the pasture, it did not bolt or roll. It walked the fence line once, slow and careful, then lowered its head to graze. "Someone taught you," Jonah murmured. That afternoon, music drifted in from a neighboring property. A few piano notes carried on the dry air, uneven, but gentle. Jonah paused his work and glanced toward the turnout. The horse had stopped grazing. It stood facing the sound, head lowered, eyes half closed, listening. When the music ended, the horse returned to grazing like nothing had happened. The unease in Jonah's chest sharpened. This was not just a calm horse. This was a horse that understood people. The vet came the next morning. She worked quietly, hands sure, voice steady. The horse stood without resistance. "Underweight," she said, "but sound, not worn out, not ruined." She crouched to look at the hooves and paused. "See this?" she asked, pointing. "That's not damage. That's a trim pattern. You don't see it much outside structured programs." "What kind of programs?" Jonah asked. "Therapy work," she said. "Training centers." Somewhere this horse had a job. After she left, Jonah stood alone in the barn. The word job stayed with him. That night he searched until his coffee went cold. Therapy horses, specialized training, quiet temperaments, horses that helped people when words failed. The next afternoon, Jonah made a call. He left a message. Hours later, his phone rang while he stood in the barn aisle. The woman on the line sounded tired but careful. Jonah described the horse, the color, the scar, the calm, the way it listened to music. There was a long pause. "That sounds like one of ours," she said, "or what one of ours used to be. Our center closed last year. Some horses were placed, others disappeared." "Did he have a name?" Jonah asked. "Yes," she said. "We called him Harbor." Jonah said the name out loud after the call ended. Harbor. The horse lifted its head and stepped closer to the stall door. No drama, no fear, just acknowledgement. The next call came the following day. A man's voice. Careful, tight. "My name is Daniel Hayes," he said. "The center gave me your number. They said you might have Harbor." Jonah closed his eyes. "I do." The silence that followed carried more weight than words. "He's alive?" the man asked. "He's safe," Jonah said. Daniel exhaled like a man coming up from deep water. "My son needs to see him," he said, "even a picture." Jonah sent photos that evening, nothing staged. Just Harbor standing in the stall, head over the door. The response came fast. Then, a video call request. On the screen, a boy sat stiffly beside his father. Thin shoulders, careful eyes. When Harbor came into view, the boy's hands trembled. "That's him," the boy whispered. "I knew it." Jonah felt his throat tighten. "He's doing okay," he said gently. After the call, Jonah sat alone at the kitchen table. The receipt lay in front of him, $200. The number felt wrong now. Over the next days, Jonah cared for Harbor with new awareness, measured feed, careful notes. Noah's voice messages began to arrive, short at first, then longer. Harbor reacted every time, not by moving closer, but by settling, listening. Daniel called again. "We can pay you," he said. "For everything." Jonah shook his head even though Daniel could not see it. "I didn't buy him to sell him," he said. "I'm just holding him until he's ready." Saturday came faster than Jonah wanted. The truck arrived just before 9. Daniel stepped out first, then the boy. Noah stood still, staring at the barn like it might disappear if he moved too fast. Inside, Harbor waited. When Noah reached the stall door, the horse stepped forward slowly. Noah leaned in and pressed his forehead against Harbor's neck. He did not cry loudly. He breathed. Loading Harbor was easy. Letting him go was not. As the truck pulled away, Jonah stood in the dust until the sound faded. The barn felt hollow. The stall stood empty. That evening, a voicemail came in, Noah's voice, quiet but sure. "Thank you for not leaving him there." Jonah stood in the empty stall and listened twice. He nailed a small sign above the door before dark. The letters were plain. Temporary shelter. The next morning, Jonah left the barn light on longer than usual. The emptiness no longer felt like an ending. It felt like a beginning, waiting for its next arrival. The barn did not sound the same without Harbor. Jonah noticed it first in the mornings. The quiet was sharper, less patient. Buckets stayed full longer. Hay did not disappear overnight. The stall stood open, clean, waiting, and Jonah found himself stopping there without thinking, resting his arms on the door like something might step back into place if he stood long enough. Noah's messages kept coming. Short updates at first. Harbor ate on the road. Harbor settled in. Harbor slept. Each one landed gently but firmly, proof that the right thing had been done even if it left a hollow behind. One afternoon, Jonah stood in the yard when his phone rang with a number he did not recognize. "Jonah Whitaker?" a man asked. "Yes." "This is Troy. I work the auction yard outside the county line." Jonah's chest tightened. He did not need to ask which one. "There's a mare here," Troy continued. "Chestnut, white blaze, quiet. She's not pushing, not calling out. People don't like quiet ones." Jonah closed his eyes. The barn light was still on behind him, even though the sun had not set. "When's the sale?" Jonah asked. "Tomorrow morning." Jonah did not answer right away. He walked to the barn and looked at the sign he had nailed above the empty stall. Temporary shelter. The words had stopped feeling temporary the moment Harbor left. "I'll be there," Jonah said. The drive back to the yard felt heavier than the first time. Jonah knew the sounds now, the smell, the way stillness could be mistaken for surrender. When he reached the pen, Troy pointed quietly. The mare stood near the back rail. Chestnut coat faded, ribs showing, head up, watching. She did not move when Jonah stepped closer. She turned her head slowly and met his eyes. Jonah felt it again. Not urgency. Recognition. In the ring, the bidding barely stirred. Jonah raised his hand without drama. The gavel fell. The trailer gate closed behind the mare with a familiar sound. Jonah rested his hand on the latch, steadying himself. Back at the ranch, the mare stepped into the same stall Harbor had once filled. She paused, listening, then lowered her head to drink. Jonah leaned on the door and exhaled. That night, he called Daniel. "I'm not stopping," Jonah said simply. Daniel was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "You don't have to do it alone." Over the weeks that followed, the ranch changed, not all at once. In practical ways, a second stall repaired, a new water line run, paperwork filed, calls made, help accepted. The mare gained weight slowly. Another horse followed. Then another. Some stayed a week, some stayed longer. Each one passed through with its own story, its own quiet request for time. Noah visited once. He stood by the fence and watched Jonah work. Harbor's halter looped through his fingers like a promise kept. "This place helps," Noah said softly. Jonah nodded. "It does." One evening, as the sun fell low and the barn settled into its patient quiet, Jonah stood alone in the aisle and looked down the row of stalls. Some were full, some were empty, all of them waited. He had not planned this life. He had come for hay. He had raised his hand without knowing what it would cost or what it would give back. Jonah reached up and adjusted the sign above the first stall, "Temporary Shelter." It no longer felt temporary. It felt true.